Hey, I'm Kevin. She's Wendy. And this is the fifth and final episode of our Antigua series. If you came here from episode 4, you'll notice that the old set is gone. No more green screen, no more desk, just me on a couch, nondescript wall behind me. See, we've left the US and are currently living in Albania. We sold or gave away pretty much everything we owned prior to leaving. There's a separate playlist alongside this one if you're interested in following that adventure. For the time being, let's close out the Antigua trip, shall we? So, if you've been following the series to this point, you'll know that we fell in love with Galleon Beach on Freeman's Bay for snorkeling. And that was again our destination on Sunday, our final full day on Antigua. We rolled out of the driveway of the treehouse at around 9 a.m., wondering what traffic might be like due to the many churches on the island. A couple of minutes later, we came across the neighborhood horses, an event barely worth noting the fourth time, other than when I wondered aloud,
where did they get water?
Now, I've since logged hundreds of miles and dozens of hours operating right-hand drive cars, but Antigua was my first foray. I still occasionally mix up the windshield wiper lever and the turn signal, and I'll never understand why they're the only things swapped around like they are. We'd had remarkably little rain all week, which is pretty rare for summer in the Caribbean. Once, when you mentioned this, she remembered that we were going to an outdoor party at Shirley Heights that night, which led to the obvious prediction.
Probably rain tonight at the party. No rain the whole time.
About 5 minutes before arriving at Galleon, it finally started to rain, steadily. The wonderful thing about rain in that part of the world is that it rarely hangs around for long, and it stays warm the whole time. So we weren't at all worried that our water fun would be spoiled by the weather. Fun fact, in the 18th century, Galleon Beach was a burial site for British sailors who died of yellow fever, a fact which was only discovered in 2010 when a hurricane uncovered remarkably well-preserved human remains, paving the way for an extensive excavation project. Once we'd parked up and gathered our gear, we once again walked to the end of the beach and used the hidden path to access the little second beach nearer to the point behind the Pillars of Hercules. Our mission today was to finally find some turtles. For a place that's supposed to be filthy with them, we hadn't encountered a single one after several hours total in the water. That morning, the visibility was better than our previous visit, which was awesome. And a spotted eagle ray favored me with a shallow swim by for one of the best clips I've gotten to date. The wrecks were easier to see this time as well, so I made sure to get a little footage of them. Now, we're all for extending the wonders of the sea to everyone, especially people who might not otherwise be physically able to get out there on their own. However, when a group of able-bodied tourists just plop into the water and splash around on electric scooters, kind of sets our teeth on edge. If you listen close while watching this beautiful stingray, you can hear the scooters from about 100 yards away. Want to guess who else isn't a big fan of those things? Turtles. Frustrated, we exited the water, deciding we'd head over to Nelson's Dockyard at English Harbor. Once back on the main beach, we ran into the guide who'd been leading the scooter crew. He asked if we'd seen any turtles, and when we responded in the negative, told us that they'd seen a few out past where the boats were moored. He also said that the turtles tend to feed twice a day, in the late morning and early afternoon. So if we could come back around 1 o'clock, we'd have a good chance of finding some. So at that point, we hopped in the car for the quick pop over to Dockyard, mostly because I was rabid to see it. We didn't stay long, so I don't have much to share, but I'll give you a few tidbits that you might not get elsewhere. While first making sure to mention that it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Horatio Nelson only presided over the Dockyard for 3 years, and he famously despised Antigua. He called it an infernal hole and spent most of his time in his cabin aboard his ship. So it's a little ironic that they named the place after him. Of course, the name came along with renovation in the 1950s, which is more than 60 years after the British abandoned the spot and nearly 150 years after he died. And while Nelson gets all the glory, it is the enslaved ancestors of today's islanders who built and ran the place. 130 enslaved workers were taken from plantations and forced to build the dockyard. And over 70% of the dockyard's workers were Africans, including shipwrights, blacksmiths, carpenters, caulkers, and sailmakers. On the 8th of March in 1744, a tent storing gunpowder ignited. The explosion killed 8 enslaved African men. Named after the date of the explosion, the 8th of March project is a collaborative endeavor whose goals are to recover and commemorate the names and lives of the enslaved and free Africans who labored in the dockyard and lived in English Harbor. Back in the 18th century, ships often arrived empty from England, which meant their holds were loaded down with bricks and stone to maintain the proper waterline and prevent them heeling over in the wind. But in order to load up with as much sugar and rum as possible, the bricks and stone were removed. And those materials were then used to construct many of the buildings still in use at the dockyard today. And we ran into these super cute goats on our way back to the car. For the record, admission fee for tourists is $15 US. After that, we popped back over to Galleon, geared up, and got back in the water. This time, we hit pay dirt. This is Moby 1 with the lampreys hitching a ride. I love how she just led me over to the lifeboat wreck for this shot. It's almost like she does this every day for these silly bipeds with their breathing tubes. Now, Moby 2 was out closer to the breakwater, so she was much deeper. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried to guess where your GoPro is pointed when the screen is dark and your mask is fogging up, but I did my best. Having succeeded in our mission, we swam in and we're back at the car around 2:15 for the drive back to the treehouse. We needed to get ready for the Sunday night party at Shirley Heights. We hired our pal Mervyn to drive us that night, which was worth every penny. In 1781, Thomas Shirley, governor of the Leeward Islands, urged fortification of the area above English Harbor to protect the dockyard. By 1788, construction had begun up on the ridge, and the military compound built there became known as Shirley Heights. These days, it is the home of the Shirley Heights Lookout Restaurant and Bar. As I've mentioned a couple of times in this series, their Sunday night party is literally world famous, and for good reason. For the record, they have a similar event on Thursday nights if you're not able to make it on Sunday. The party kicks off at 4:30 in the afternoon, and the Halcyon Steel Orchestra plays for the first 2 hours. The menu is extensive, and the staff cranks out a ton of food at breakneck pace. Admission is $10 US or 25 Eastern Caribbean dollars, with kids under 12 getting in for free. Reservations are not required nor accepted. As they put it on their official Instagram, just turn up with your people or simply on your own. Resting 500 feet above English Harbor and facing west, the view is spectacular, especially at sunset. And after the steel band set was done, the cover band on stage began and played for the rest of the night. As a general rule, people who travel to Antigua are a similar breed, by which I mean chill, unpretentious, and out for a good time without any baggage, which I think plays a significant role in the longevity and popularity of this event. There are people from all over the world in this shot, from different socioeconomic backgrounds and all ages, and every single person is having a great time. On day one, we had arranged with our fellow reef riders, Abigail and John, to seek each other out at the party, and somehow, within this sea of humanity, we were able to reconnect and compare notes on the intervening days. Most of the night is pretty self-explanatory, so I'll just show you a quick montage before we move on. On the way back to the treehouse, while stopped at a red light, a man approached the van and spoke with Mervyn. The local patois is really tough for us to follow, but once we were on our way again, Mervyn let us know what the conversation was about.
So you want a woman?
You want a woman?
Yeah. So you go to town. Put in town. You have money, you want a woman. Go to town. Let me focus in town. Yeah.
In the morning, we finished the final preparations for returning to the States. We left the treehouse for the final time at 2 p.m. and stopped for gas on the way to the airport. Once at the airport, we received an unwelcome surprise. Turned out we had missed an email from American Airlines informing us that the U.S. government had reinstituted a required COVID-19 test for re-entry to the country, which meant we had to find a doctor to perform and certify the test within about an hour. Luckily, one of the women at the airline counter knew of just such a doctor on the island. It took a while, but eventually they arrived to swab our sinuses and WhatsApped us the negative results shortly thereafter. for $100 apiece. A perfect example of why we always suggest having some cash tucked away that you don't intend to use. Okay, now let's hit the final expense tally for this trip. Airfare from SFO to Antigua, $917. Return airfare to SFO, $927. Long-term parking, $126. Travel insurance, $352. Rental car, $291. Those wonderful accommodations at the Treehouse, $621. The hotel in New York City on the return leg, $152. Outing with the Reef Riders on Thursday, $250. The boat dives with Dive Carib, $298. 2 days of snorkeling at Galleon Bay, $0. Nelson's Dockyard entry fee, $30. Shirley Heights entry fee, $20. Driver for the night, $100. COVID-19 tests, $200. Fuel for the car, pretty sure we spent around $65. And miscellaneous expenses like food and drink at Shirley Heights, other dining out, groceries, beer and wine, souvenirs, tips, etc., came to $680. All for a grand total, all-in cost of $5,029, which is not a small number on its own, I'll grant you. But look at it in perspective. As I pointed out in a previous episode, had we stayed at the little resort down the street, we would have spent that just on accommodations. As it is, we got a lot and did a lot for that $5,000. And we learned a lot on this trip, too. This was the first time we rented a place with a kitchen, and we overspent on groceries big time. We've since learned to take a more metered approach, buying just what we need for 1 or 2 meals at a time and shopping every day. Now, our trips don't tend to be very relaxing either. You might not be interested in heading out with the Reef Riders or going scuba diving, and those accounted for $550 of our total. That's a lot of
drinks with little umbrellas in them.
Or maybe you choose to forego both of those and you also don't need a rental car. That's like $840 you could add to your accommodations budget if you want to stay in a nice hotel. Hopefully, I'm making my point. This is what we chose to spend our money on. We identified our priorities and our budget and built the itinerary from there. We would have liked to have stayed longer, but that wasn't possible once we decided to do the Reef Riders. And then learning that we would have to spend the night in New York on the way back factored into the budget too, right? Sure, we could have roughed it and spent the night on hard chairs in the airport, but we prioritized sleeping in a bed, which shortened our stay in paradise. It is a balancing act of giving and taking away. Since we travel together, sometimes we have to compromise. Neither of us always gets everything we want, but we both get something we want. Lucky for us, we don't tend to differ much on stuff like that, but occasionally it happens. Wendy has a knack for the parts that I find is drudgerous, a word, the planning and price comparisons and the back and forth minutia of what can be saved by leaving a day sooner or later, or being a bit less comfortable on a flight, or staying outside of town rather than in the heat of the action. Meanwhile, I take great satisfaction in finding fun stuff to do and digging into the history and traditions of a place. If you can find ways to find fun in the planning stages, before you know it, you'll be planning multiple trips at once, the way we do. Antigua is known as the Friendly Island, and the moniker is well earned. Every person we dealt with was warm, welcoming, and willing to help if we would only ask. This extended from the teenagers I mentioned in episode 1 who we encountered on our way from the airport, all the way through to the women who helped us find COVID tests in time for us to still make our flight. It is a good and welcome lesson every once in a while to be reminded that it doesn't take any extra effort to be courteous and friendly, and that smiles are contagious. And no matter where you find yourself, from the bustling market in St. John's to any one of the 365 public beaches, Antigua offers no shortage of reasons to smile. That wraps it up for this series. Next up, here on the travel playlist, we'll be staying in the Caribbean, heading about 120 miles south to the nature island of Dominica. Be sure to pop over to the Moving to Albania playlist, which we'll be continually updating also. And thanks, as always, for watching. If you're enjoying our content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. None of it costs a thing other than a moment or two of your time, and it really makes a big difference in how many eyes YouTube shows our content to. Take care, and see you in the next one.